doing what's called a 10-step grayscale. And, or yeah, 10-step grayscale, but we're gonna have actually 11, we're gonna have 11 rectangles that we're gonna use. Now, when we initially lay it out, it's gonna look very similar to this. Let me see if I can lower it a little bit. There we go. So we're gonna lay it out in a very, very light fashion. And it's incredibly important that you recognize that, because when we lay it out, it's going to be super, super important that you keep these lines extremely light, to the point that maybe your neighbor might see it, but if you see it, that's all that matters. Okay, and here's the reason why. We do not want these lines to show up in the grayscale at all. We might see a little bit here and there, especially in the white, but in these, we don't want to see them at all. We want value to create an edge and not a line. Now, we learned heavily about line today, but line becomes, it can flatten out an object that we're drawing. Now, with an addition to value, it can create something really nice. And so we want to have every one of these panels to be just the value that's being created. We do not want line to define the edge. We want the value to define the edge. Even the differences between each value, we don't want to see a line between them. If we have an edge, great, but we don't want to see a line. So that's one of the reasons why we want to be able to use, at the very darkest, an F pencil to lay it out. I'm going to use the F pencil because you're going to be able to see it. I recommend that when you guys lay out your diagram, that you actually use a 2H pencil. 2H pencil is going to be the lightest pencil that you have, and that could really help. Now, the tip can be very sharp, and it should be sharp, but it could be sharp to the point where it could score your paper, meaning it could create a groove in your paper if you press too hard. So it's going to be super important to understand that. Now let's look at let me turn it like this. We have 11 rectangles that are centered, and it is 1 inch high by 2 inches wide. Now there's 11 rectangles. So if these are 11 rectangles, and each one of these are 1 inch high, how long is this grayscale? 11 inches. Okay, we have 11 rectangles. They're all 1 inch high, so this is 11 inches by 2 inches. Okay, it's 11 by 2 inches. Now, one of the easiest ways to approach this is this. It doesn't matter. You want to keep it more or less centered here and here. Now, more or less here is not as important as here. We don't want this off to the left or right side. We want to keep it more or less centered. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to think about how you can lay it out. One of the easiest ways is this. It doesn't matter what side you use, but if you measure from one side only and measure 8 inches in, here, up, down here, and up here, and then create a line, that's going to be a really good start. Now at the bottom, we go 8 inches in here, and then 5 inches from either side. It doesn't matter where you start. 8 inches in from the left, and let's say 5 inches from the bottom. That can make it a lot easier, and then after that you can get started with it. So let me show you how 8 inches. I'm going to make a mark on the right and on the left. Super, super easy. You may not see the mark, but you'll see the line. And when you place your ruler down, hold it tight. And draw your line. Now, when you draw your line, don't make it too dark. You want to make it dark enough so you can actually see it. But you don't want to make it so dark that you can't erase it. So I can easily erase any part of this line as I need to. and you won't actually see it. So it's going to be super important to understand that. Now, you're also going to measure 5 inches from either side. It doesn't matter what side you start, but this is 8 inches, and now I'm going to measure 5 inches. Oh, actually, I'm going to do it on both sides of this. I don't want to hit my cables. And make sure you're measuring precisely. You don't want it to be approximate, you want it to be precise. So make a couple of tick marks. I apologize if you already know how to use a ruler, but we do have to express this. Okay, so now I have a line all the way across. Let me make it a little bit darker. Okay. And how long is our grayscale? 11 inches. Okay. So I'm going to put it right on 11. I'm going to make a mark at 0. I could do it in a couple spots, and I'll also do it up here too. So even though I measured 5 inches to here, I'm also measuring 11 inches from here too. Okay, now I'm going to make another line. It's not going to be as long. Okay, now how wide is it?
2 inches.
2 inches, super easy. Okay, so from here, I put my ruler right on 2, and I make a mark at 0. You could do it reversed if you want to, it doesn't matter. It's still going to work. So again, your grayscale is 11 by 2 inches. And again, it's important to be very precise and make sure that your lines are nice and crisp. You don't want your ruler to wander, so take your time with it. Okay, now notice how light my lines are. They're light enough that I can get my eraser and I can erase the guidelines that I laid down. Now, your Factus eraser can work with this. Your white pearl eraser can also work with this too. Okay, now I need to make the rectangles. So this is where I had started before. So one of the easiest ways that I know how to do this is I put 11 in at 0. I put it right on that line, and I'm going to make a series of tick marks. So let's say I'm a smidgen off like I am here. We can't have that. You have to be exact. So if you find out that your measurements are off, fix it right away. Take your time making sure that this is as perfect as you can make it. Make sure that this is exactly 11 inches by 2. Okay, and once you have that, make a mark at every inch. Now, if you never learned how to use a ruler and you're kind of embarrassed to say it out loud, just pull me aside or just raise your hand. I'll come around and help you. The sad thing is, in the school systems now, they don't teach kids how to use rulers anymore. Not usually. Okay, so I have tick marks all the way across. And now I'm going to take my time. Actually, I'm going to use this. This is my slide ruler. Gives me perfect parallel lines every time. So if my pencil is getting dull, I'll need to sharpen it. And if you mess up, fix it right away. So this is a diagram. This is not a drawing. And the reason why I say that is because it's a diagram, it does need to be as perfect as you can make it, especially when you start off. If you're drawing too dark, it can hinder your success in your drawing. If you don't fix your mistakes right away, it can hinder the success of your grayscale or your diagram. A diagram is a tool, and we're going to use this diagram specifically to learn about how values work, or how, let's say, how they're arranged from light to dark. Okay, so this is what it will look like when you are done. So I'll have, it doesn't matter if this is black or this is white, it doesn't matter which way you start. Now mine are very specific. I usually have the dark towards the bottom. Doesn't matter how you do it. Now, there's a simple way to do this. How many of you have done a grayscale before? Okay, 3, 4 people, 5. Okay, cool. Now, tell me if I'm wrong. Usually when you do a grayscale, you start with white and you get darker and darker and darker and darker, and hopefully you will get black, right? Okay, so we're going to do something different. Now, we don't approach that when we do this because it will take a long time. See, when we approach this, we're going to do something where we compare. If you guys remember, we've always done something like comparative measurements. We do comparative angles. Well, we will also compare values too. So let me explain how we do this. I know it'll make sense. Let me grab this one. Actually, I'll do this one first. So white stays white, so that's a freebie. If there's any area that you see a line, you're probably going to see it in white. And then we're going to go to black. Now, we're going to go to the far end. So we're going to make this as dark as we can, but it's going to take time to do. This is not something where you can get your 6B pencil out and make it as dark as you possibly can. Any fool can do that, but we're not any fool. You're in my class, and we do things a little bit more practical and a little bit easier to learn how values work. So we're going to go from white and black. We're going to get the black as dark as we can possibly make it, but it does take time. And then comparing these two, we're going to get the one in the middle. We're going to get something in between. That is 50% gray between white and black, and we're going to get something that's 50%. And then we can get these two, white and 50%, and we can get something that is maybe 30%. And then we can compare the white and the 30% and get something that's 20 and, or let's say, yeah, this is, yeah, 20 and, let's say 40%. And then we could get something that's 20 and 30%. So when we start comparing grays, it makes it much easier to accomplish a grayscale. So that's why you see the grayscale like this. I started white, then I went to black. Then I compared these two to get something that was 50%. I compared these two to get something that was 40%. Or I'm sorry, this is 60%, and this is 40%. But I compared these two to get this. And then after that, I compared these two to start to get something in between. That's partially done. And I will do that over and over again until I'm done. Before you know it, you have something that is efficiently accomplished. And the last one is this one. So I'll show you on the other two. But you can see that if I were to start here and get something that might be 10% gray, I don't know it's 10% gray because I have nothing to compare it to. Black is black. You can't get anything darker than that. If you see any white tones underneath, like the paper, then it's not dark enough. All right, so let me switch the view. All right, so this is going to be black, this is white, white's going to stay where it is. I'm going to start with my 2H pencil, not 2F. I wish they had a 2F pencil. This is my 2H pencil, and I'm going to start here. And I usually do it in a single direction first, especially if I'm doing a lighter value. And I'll show you guys a few tricks on how to use graphite on a grayscale, and it'll make things a lot easier. So when people start creating a grayscale, and they obviously know they have to stay inside the lines, but staying inside the lines here on the borders of it is more important than it is going to another value. So this is a 2H pencil. We know this is one of the lightest pencils in your kit. I think you might have a 3H pencil, but you can use your 3H pencil too. Now, it's less important to stay inside the lines. I mean, it's more important to stay inside the lines towards the edges, because you don't want it to go. You can go outside the edges if you want to and erase it after, but with the lighter values, it's not too critical. So you can go outside the lines if you want to, but when you get to the darker values or the darker pencils, it makes a huge difference. So you want to stay inside the lines if possible. If you're going through here with your lighter pencil because you want value to create an edge, that's not a big deal, because this is a lighter pencil. You're going to be using a 2H pencil in the 90% gray anyway, so it doesn't matter. It makes sense? Because this is the lightest pencil, technically, you can use this 2H pencil from here all the way through if you want to, okay? Because technically you would probably doing that anyway. So if this 2H pencil is going to exist in all 10 grays, then you don't have to worry about trying to stay inside the lines when it comes between each one. Value is going to create the edge anyway, so it's not a big deal. So if you want to do 2 at a time, you can do 2 at a time if you want to. You guys are going to figure out your own process and what works and what doesn't work. So I'm keeping my pencil strokes really close together. Again, you can go outside the edges or outside the borders of the grayscale, but recognize the fact that you're going to have to go back and clean it up. So don't do this too far where you can't actually go and clean it up. So how do you clean it up? You can get your straight edge, your ruler. I'll use this one. This one's been working. Put it right on the edge and use your ruler as an erasing shield. Okay, it comes off super, super slick. So I'm using this one because it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see. With your rulers, you might have to flip it upside down because you guys have a cork back ruler, and the cork will create an issue, can create an issue. Okay, so there's 2H. Now I'm gonna go to my H pencil. Let's say my H, I'll do my HB, I'll do F. Yeah, F, I'll do F. Now I'll also end up using an F in here too, in this one as well. But I'm gonna work right to the edge. So this is a much softer pencil. Now I wanna make sure the tip of my pencil is nice and sharp. The sharper the pencil is, the more it can get into the different grooves of the paper. Be very methodical when you do it. Don't be hasty. It does take time. We are spending the rest of the day on this. So I'm going to go over it again. It's black anyway. And I'm keeping my strokes quite long when I do these, when I do this third pass. And as I do that, I don't want to go back and forth too much because it creates, starts to create a pattern, and so I want to be really careful. And I want to be able to make sure that the values are nice and smooth. Now I'm using the same pressure on this pencil as I did with the other ones. And you want to be able to do that too. If you keep in medium pressure, you're still gonna get a gray, but you're also gonna be able to stay in control. Okay, so this is my F. Now I'm going to go to my HB. By the way, this is a boring demo, so I get it. But this one actually goes pretty fast when it comes to the black. Some people do it in circles. Some people do it at different angles. I like to keep my angles the same. And I'll change my angle if I need to make it darker. So the reason why we're using drawing paper rather than using the sketch paper is the sketch paper will start to curl. It'll start to curl on you if you only use the sketch paper. You can't really handle a grayscale. I had a student that started doing a wonderful grayscale, and they love to render, which means that they like to they like shading. But they liked it so much that when you finally saw their grayscale, because they did it on sketch paper, the whole thing was wavy. It was all buckled because they put too much pressure on the pencil, on the paper. So with this is an HB pencil. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction because I want to get this pretty even. The sharper the pencil, the more it's going to get into all the different grooves of the paper. Black will take the longest to create. Okay, so there's the HB. I'm going to jump to the 3B pencil. There we go.
On average, how many pencils does it take to do with black?
All of them, practically. I'm skipping a few only because I can make an HB pencil look like a 4B pencil if I wanted to, or I can make it look like a 3B pencil if I wanted to. So I will probably use like 7 of them, but if you need to use all of them, then use all of them. You notice I'm being really, really careful not to create a halo around the whole thing. Want it to be really, really smooth. Okay, so again, this is the 3B pencil. So I'm starting to do things in different directions. I'm starting to apply it in different directions. Simply so I can get it even. Okay, so I'm going to go to the 4B pencil. I use a 4B pencil a lot, that's why it's so small. Okay, so the value is telling me that I'm more than halfway there. Now if you flub and you go outside the lines and you can fix it, fix it. Okay, what other questions do you have?
What do you mean by halo?
Oh, I'll show you. That's a great question. I will do it. Let me see, which one this is my least favorite one. I'll show you a halo. I'll do it on this one because this is not perfect. And I wasn't going to actually use this one in my demo today. I'll do it with the 8B pencil. Sometimes when we work the edges too much, we get a halo, and you will actually see it here because it's not gonna. This is not that dark as it should be. This is like an 80% gray. I know to you guys it looks black. Sometimes when people start working the edges too dark, and it doesn't matter if it's black, if you're doing a black or an 100% black, or if you're doing a let's say 60% gray. Let's say I have to let's say it's a 50% gray and I have to lighten it up. See the halo? You know, even though they're blotting and everything, they're making it lighter. They'll end up doing this, and it may look like super clean edges, but then all of a sudden, it starts to look like this, and they're like, oh shoot, I better smooth it out. It needs to be smoother. So they start getting let's say a lighter pencil, and yeah, it starts to look smoother. And you go back and you get the edges nice and dark. And it creates a halo. So you have this dark halo around it, and then the center is a lighter gray. So you want to avoid dark halos. And so when you look at it even closer, I'll bring it up to the camera. It has this inconsistency to it. So you want to be really careful with it. Now I know you guys are super anal about stuff like this, so I know you guys are going to do just fine. Now let's see what we can do with this. Oh, here's a 5B pencil. So remember on the very first day of class, I showed you guys that the self-portrait that I did when I was in college. And I told you it was graphite. It was nice and black. It was all graphite. But there was a trick to doing that. And the face was fine, but there's a trick to get something like super, super black. And we can't really do it here because it's not illegal, but there's a chemical that we use called Bestine. And Bestine is rubber cement thinner. Now, rubber cement is exactly what it sounds like. It's the cement that we use for to glue paper. It's a very, very old type of glue, but it's 100% latex, I think. Latex rubber. Anyway, the Bestine evaporates by oxygen hitting it. When the air hits it, it starts evaporating right away. So what we do is we grind up graphite and get graphite powder. And with the graphite powder, we get a brush, like a watercolor brush, or we use a rag, and we dip a little bit of it in the Bestine, and then we dip it in the powdered graphite, and then we rub it on. When we rub it on, as soon as we rub it on and blow on it, the Bestine evaporates and it just leaves graphite on it. So that's how we're able to use it. And you know how when you rub graphite, or you're using graphite in a certain area and it gets shiny and shiny and shiny? When you look at my self-portrait and you hold it on an edge, you look at it at an angle, there's no sheen on at all. So it's pretty awesome. I'm trying to get it back. My dad has it. I'm trying to get it back. So when we're doing this though, it is possible that your blacks might get shiny. And so you want to be careful with it, because sometimes when it looks shiny, it starts to look gray. So you want to be careful with it, and you don't want to use too hard of a pressure on it. If you notice that you can see some of the white of the paper underneath, and I'm using a 6B pencil right now, and I have no hope of getting into those tiny grooves of the paper to get it darker. There's nothing I can do. Yes, I can use a harder pressure, but I'm still not going to be able to get into those tiny grooves. And it's starting to get nice and black, but I still have all that in there. So what I'm going to do, and I'll hold it up closer so you guys can see it. See that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a 2B pencil, sharpen it, 2B pencil. I'm going to sharpen it, and I'm going to take my time to get into all those little tiny grooves in the paper. When I do that with a harder pencil, it makes it blacker, it makes it darker, it makes it richer, because it can do something that the softer pencils cannot do. The softer pencils can't get into those smaller grooves because it's too soft. These pencils are harder, and they can get into those tiny grooves of the paper, and eventually it'll make it darker, but it does take a little bit of time to do. You can see already it's already starting to get darker. Okay, that's starting to look good. So that's my 2B pencil. This is my H4B pencil, not my 4H pencil. Okay, it's time to clean it up. I can still see the original guidelines that I used, so I'm going to use that as, so I can lay this eraser, this ruler down right there. Okay, super clean. Do the same thing here. So I have a little bit of a fuzzy edge, but I'll fix it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my 4B pencil. I keep calling it 4H. Okay, so you can see it kind of has a fuzzy edge to it, so I'm going to put this, since I erased it, I'm going to put this right on the edge, crisp that edge up. Look at that, super, super clean. And I'll do it here too. I'll do it here. Now this could be refined even more, but this is enough for our demo. There we go. And now I will also do it here. So again, I want to avoid the halo. Okay, so last but not least, I'm going to use my 8B pencil one more time. I'm going to do one more pass. And I'm only gonna try to hit the areas that need to be hit. Now, as you start to do your grayscale, it can get very messy. So you notice I'm trying very hard, or I'm doing what I can to keep my fingertips away from this. I'm also avoiding my hand from rubbing on top of it. So eventually, as I work down the grayscale, well, I'll probably have to use an erasing shield. I'm sorry, a shield for my hand. Okay, so let's see what this looks like up close. Now, you'll notice I didn't get my finger and start rubbing my finger on it to smooth it out. Don't do that. Anybody can do that, but we're not doing that because, number one, it doesn't teach you anything about control. So we're never going to rub our fingers on it to try to move the graphite around. No matter how much you try to hide it, it always looks like you smeared it. So you want to avoid that. Anybody can smear it. but we're not going to smear it. Any good artist is not going to do that with graphite. It's one of the worst things you can do when you're drawing. Okay, let's see how much better it is. Okay, that's not bad, Professor B. There's a few areas that it can work on, but that will work. Okay, so from here, it's the ghost. Okay, so it is still filming. So from here, what I'll do is I will compare the white and the black to get the 50% gray or somewhere really close. And then I'll compare those two and I'll keep working it until eventually I'll have something substantial that I can keep working it and working it and working it until it's done. Okay?